The Purple Rain Fantasy Show is a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. If you have not checked out the Full-Time Fantasy site yet, you can sign up for free and check out all the contests available this season, including Beat the Expert Leagues, $35 Starter Leagues, Best Ball Championships, Online Championship Leagues where you can win $50,000, the Dynasty World Championship, and the granddaddy of them all, the Fantasy Football World Championship in Las Vegas, and online at playffwc.com. See how you measure up against the experts for your chance to win $150,000. Bookmark it, check it out at fulltimefantasy.com. Okay, so maybe you're not going to Vegas, but I bet many of you are going to be part of a live fantasy football draft. If you are the one hosting the live draft, let me ask you something. Are you using a Commish Kit draft board? Commish Kit is celebrating their 18th year and offers the absolute best draft boards anywhere. They've got standard boards and corrugated boards. These are heavy-duty, solid, presentable, readable boards. They come with 400-plus player labels. They've got over 30 additional blank labels for fill-ins, and each purchase includes a free marker, two-sided tape to mount it up, and can be custom ordered to fill your 8 through 16 team leagues. Commish Kit ships for free and will not arrive folded up like a road map. If you order a competitor online, you're going to get this thing, you're going to unfold it, and a million different, it's going to look like hell. For Purple Rain Show listeners, I need you to use promo code PIGSKIN to get your kit today. Check out the website at commishkit.com and check out their YouTube page if you want to see the board in live action. You will not be disappointed. Again, that's commishkit.com. Welcome to the Purple Rain Show. I'm your host, Frank B. We got an awesome podcast for you guys today. We're going to talk about the history of fantasy football. I got a very, very special guest. Mitch Zimmer is going to hop on with us here. We're going to talk about old school fantasy football from the ground up, how we first got into it, how the game has evolved, a lot of hilarious things that we used to do back in the day just to run the league, and crazy stuff you wouldn't imagine wasting all of your time doing in this day and age. But before we get into that, I wanted to get a quick trip down memory lane on the quick fantasy football history lesson. So before we jump into the podcast, here we go. You've got the inaugural first ever fantasy football league. It was called the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Prognosticators League. So how about that for a name? Put that on a plaque and throw that on your first place trophy, huh? So what it was in Oakland, California, 1963. The league consisted of 8 members made up of administrative affiliates of the AFL, Pro Football Journalists, or someone had purchased or sold 10 season tickets for the Raiders 1963 season. So each roster on this league consisted of 2 quarterbacks, 4 halfbacks, 2 fullbacks, 4 offensive ends, 2 punt returners, 2 field goal kickers, 2 defensive backs or linebackers, and 2 defensive linemen. IDP, what's up? So the current standing today's roster in that league, the GOPPPL, now includes 2 quarterbacks, 4 halfbacks, 6 wide receivers, tight ends, 2 kickers, 2 defensive backs, 1 return team, and then they get a bonus pick for any position. I think that's pretty cool, a little bonus pick, but it's a pretty neat twist on scoring, and I know the scoring is starting to really get customizable, and there's some cool stuff in a lot of leagues around the world here. So in 85, Grandstand Sports Services launched the first nationally available fantasy football leagues online through QLink, which was later America Online. You've got mail. Between 85 and 1996 to offer automated drafting, real-time scoring, real-time trading, transactions, continuous leagues. Pretty neat stuff considering way back in the day how primitive these computers were and just things you could do online that we take for granted now. Fast forward to 1996, there's a court case between the NBA and Motorola. Motorola was making early cell phones. They were making pagers. They had a lock on the pager market back then. But what they did, this lawsuit brought a huge impact to the fantasy gaming industry. It set a precedent that would forever change it, as far as the landscape of fantasy sports. So what happened with the case is it's brought about when the NBA, they're trying to stop Motorola from sending their users, their customers, pager updates of NBA scores and statistics. So that's right. Your doctor's, at the office, beep, goes off, hits the hip, and there's your NBA score. So Motorola got all their information without the consent of the NBA, and Motorola funded it entirely on their own. The NBA claims that scores and statistics are property of NBA and covered by copyright. So the court rules that because the scores and stats that Motorola was sending their users was entirely factual, they can't be covered by a copyright law. So Motorola wins the case, and they're allowed to continue sending scores and updates to pagers that morphs into cell phones, text, everything we know today. So in later years, fantasy sports players, they're able to get real-time updates, games. It went, to the NFL, Major League Baseball, and so on. So the whole landscape literally changed on that big-time court case, which is pretty cool. 1997, CBS jumps in and launches the first beta version of the first publicly available free fantasy football website. Back then, all these, avenues and websites and companies charged you to get on. And some of them, they're like $100. Some of them were $75. I remember ones that were $49.99 to get in and start messing around with fantasy stuff. So the game immediately became popular. Within 3 years, everybody had, competing hosting websites of doing their own thing. Now, if you think about it, NFL got into the game in 2010. It's a little late, but 2010 as it is drove the industry growth through the roof. When it's official NFL, I remember that was a big deal because it was finally, if you consider it resembling gambling, it was kind of almost a win of saying, hey, NFL finally acknowledges this kind of gambling little vibe of fantasy football, which was pretty cool. But now, it's the single most important marketing tool for the NFL. They've got over 20 million people doing this. It's insane. Jump ahead a couple years to July 99. Yahoo is the first to stand out and say, you know what? This stuff's free. Here you go. NFL released their own, like I said, 2010, but Yahoo was the first to really give you a good product free of charge with, scoring settings and some kind of things set in stone as far as rosters. You could move some things around like you take for granted now, of course, but back then it was new and it was pretty cool. So Yahoo got a really strong foothold in the game doing that. So everything kind of has rolled off of that platform and evolved, and we've got a million different platforms, ESPN, Sleeper, My Fantasy League. There's all kinds of cool stuff right now in the landscape of fantasy football. Lots of choices, lots of customizable stuff. So with that said, that's your quick history lesson for the day before we get into the podcast. I'm going to bring Mitch on here in a second, and let's get into it. All right, let's welcome aboard my good friend, Mitch Zimmer. He is out of Philly. He's a longtime fantasy footballer and one of the godfathers in the industry. You can find him on Twitter at Mitch Zimmer 2019. Mitch, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Frank.
Been looking forward to getting together with you on some history of fantasy football. Like I've said on some previous podcasts about, we really take it for granted that everybody has been playing as long as we have or within a respectable amount of time. And it's easy to forget that a lot of people are new, maybe 2-3 years into playing in the league. And,
right.
There's a lot of pretty cool history to this fantasy football world. Am I right?
Oh, my Lord. Cool and like a hurricane cold. I'm telling you, this will blow away a lot of your listeners. Believe me.
Yeah, just like computers and cell phones, the changes that have progressed through all these years, the fantasy football it can almost mirror some of those as far as things we used to do and record stats, league histories, all kinds of stuff. So what I want to get into first here with you is let's go way back. I know you've been playing a long time, But let's jump to your first ever fantasy league. So give me kind of like an overview. You know, how many teams were in this thing and settings, kind of stuff like that.
Sure. You're really going to want to know when it started.
Yeah, give me the year. I need the year first.
1988. 88. Now that's 32 fantasy football seasons ago.
Wow.
Many people that I play fantasy football with right now are barely 32 years old themselves. So this started in 1988. I am from the Philadelphia area right now. I'm 66 years old. 33 years I lived where I grew up in New York City, and the last 33 years where I am now. So I mentioned this because I was kind of new in my neighborhood, and my ex-wife was pretty friendly with this woman who was married at the time but is no longer to this fella who was starting a fantasy football league. I had no idea what it was. Fantasy football, I had no idea. But my ex-wife said, you know what? You like football. This is a way for you to meet some of the guys, you know, some people, because we're new in the area. So go ahead and do it. So this guy, Kevin, started the league. And I mentioned the fact that we both have ex-wives. It's very germane to this, because the original league in 1988 had 16 teams, 16 owners. Over half of the original 16 is no longer married to who they were married to in 1988, including me. You know, I'm now married very happily 10 years to my wife, Randy. But 16 teams, and the common denominator was Kevin. So either you knew him from the neighborhood, which I did, you worked with him from his place of employment at the time, or you grew up with him through childhood. And there were 16 guys there, and I got to know a lot of them, and my optometrist and my attorney still in that league right now. I'm presently the commissioner, but those are two guys that I became friendly with and still are friendly with. And in fact, one of the guys helped me through my divorce. He's a lawyer. It's just been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's just like we say it, you know, in the fantasy community, even on like Twitter, it is a kick-ass community. Everybody's really top notch. So I mean, that just goes to show you how long it's been a good, solid community overall.
Absolutely, and I also will tell you that 3 of the original owners from back then are no longer with us. Oh. So the league's evolved in terms of members and how many, but there were 16 teams. But how did we do this? Okay, so your research was totally predicated on those magazines, like the Street and Smith and Lindy's and Sporting News.
See, I lived off USA Today's. That was my bread and butter every day.
Right. So that's where we got the stats for the week. The Monday morning and then Tuesday morning for the one game, USA Today were our official stats.
Yep.
No arguing. That's where we got the stats from. And how did you do it? You did it 100% by hand. So we did our research, you know, from either what we knew, what we watched on TV, the whole eyeball thing, and the magazines. And then we came to live drafts every year. And that was always a highlight of the year, the live drafts. And we either would do them in restaurants or bars. It morphed into my house after a while, where I barbecued for everybody for a number of years.
Very
so,
nice.
Yeah. So, the scoring was kind of wonky too, because even those magazines for fantasy didn't actually have a standardized scoring system like we have these days. Like everybody pretty much
Wild West. It was come up with your own stuff too.
Exactly. So Kevin actually made the rules up, and he made the points up, and he made the stats up. But here's where Wild West is an excellent analogy that you used right there, Frank, because we didn't know what we didn't know. So guys were flouting the rules all over the place, including trades and standings and points and all of that. And every time there was a loophole that needed to be closed, the rules needed to be updated.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of Kevin's time. And after 2 years of the commissioner, his ex-wife gave him an ultimatum, which essentially was he had to step down from being the commissioner. So he said to me, you're a pretty organized guy and the guys all like you and everything. Could you take it over for a year while I straighten things out with my wife? Well, that was in the 1990 season. And I've been the commissioner ever since. So that 1 year has lasted from 1990 on. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. That's a lot of football.
Oh yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
crazy.
So, and how did I keep track of everything? I had a word processor, and I am a two-finger typist, so you could imagine.
Yeah.
How did they set how they set the lineups? I had a dedicated phone line, like people had a fax line back then, a dedicated phone line with an answering machine, and the guys had to call in their transactions on the machine by 6 o'clock every night, and then I would be putting them down in a legal pad, and then I'd regurgitate them back somewhere around 7 or 8 o'clock that night. And it was a first come, first served thing. Whomever got it on the tape got the player. Got the player. Yeah, I mean, that's so, and then I do the recording every night. This is the rotisserie League phone. This is tape number 1 for the week, tape number 2 for the week, and so on. And then we would put a capper on when you can make transactions. And they were usually Friday at 6 p.m. So if you didn't get your transaction in Friday 6 p.m., you were toast, and that was it. And I didn't mention this yet, but we didn't do head-to-head. This was called the Rotisserie League because it's short for rotisserie, and that's exactly the type of style the league had. It was total points.
Okay.
And if you kind of dropped out of the race pretty early, some of the guys started dropping out of interest. So in 1991, what I did was I started giving out a $25 weekly prize for the highest points of the week. And you're probably saying $25 a week. Wait a minute. What was your buy-in at the time?
Yeah.
Now think about this. 1990, 91, $250. We had 16 teams, so you could imagine the prize pool. And we were giving $25 each week because I felt it was a way to maintain everybody's interest, even if they were kind of dropping down into the standings. So that's how we did rotisserie for a long, long time. And then finally, another component of this was you could start 2 quarterbacks, and it was an IDP, individual defensive player league. And you could start 2 linebackers, 2 defensive linemen, 2 defensive backs maximum. But you can carry as many as you want. And our rosters back in the day were 25 players.
Jeez. Now going back to like some of those scoring settings, what did you run for, like, were touchdown 6? Did you do any kind of PPR stuff or some other, or even oddball settings of just, I know it was the Wild West and we had some custom stuff, but was there anything that kind of stands out now where you couldn't even imagine doing something like that now, or something that could be like a breakthrough for this? I mean, things are starting to change in the scoring landscape, I think, currently, which is nice.
Frank, you wouldn't want this scoring.
No?
Believe me, you wouldn't want this scoring. I still have a folder in one of my drawers downstairs with the original scoring that goes back to how we did it in the Rotisserie League when we were doing everything by hand. Touchdowns were 3 points, regardless of who scored them. Passing, receiving, rushing, there were 3. No, quarterbacks didn't get any yardage points until they started to throw for 250 yards. If the quarterback didn't throw for if they threw for 249 or less, you didn't get yardage points. Okay. The increments for wide receivers and running backs in terms of their yardage were increments of 20 yards apiece, starting, if you're sitting down, 100 yards.
Oh boy.
So we did have 1 point per reception, but the receptions started with 3. So if you got less than 3, you didn't even get a point for a reception. Then the same thing with tackles. Tackles, if you wanted credit for a tackle, the guy had to tackle 3 times or more. We also had some very wonky kicking stats as well. So, but interceptions, there was 2 points per interception, 2 points a sack, 1 point for for a tackle, starting with 3, things like that. So that's why I say you wouldn't want any of those stats now. And we did it all and the USA Today did keep track of individual tackles.
Yep.
So I would spend my lunch hour every Monday just poring over this myself. And then I'd put the standings Monday night, and then again, updated after the Monday Night Football game, but I'd put the standings on our recording device, and if somebody had a discrepancy and said, Mitch, I didn't have 102 points, I had 106 points, we'd go over it together. And that was another way. I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it because that was a way for me to kind of stay in communication with the guys on the phone all during the football season.
Jeez, because I started like 99, 2000, so I'm about 11, 12 years past your 88. And for me, it was at work, and I've always been into football, and I saw this fantasy stuff, and it was like most of the outlets were charging you to be a member to get in and do more with fantasy. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to pay for this. I mean, not being a cheapskate, but I don't really know all about the stuff yet. Is it, what's it all about? And I always figured I'll get with somebody that's into it. Well, we had a guy at my work that put together the fantasy league at work. So he's like, who wants to be in it? So he got, I think it was like 10 of us, and we did a draft. So everything kind of happened for me at work, and the scoring settings were pretty streamlined by then. I mean, they were still archaic compared to today. But we would do the same thing. I mean, every lunch break, I'm in my car with the USA Today running down the stat lines, making sure I didn't get ripped off for the finals that he posted. He'd stick them on the break room wall with all our team names. Handwritten score, here's your final score, Frank's team, here's your final score, Bill's team, and go right down the line. And it was like, everybody's checked make sure he didn't get ripped off this week, because I know Brett Favre had 3 touchdowns, and I know, and you're running against the USA Today, you're like, you better not rip me off on this. And then, we had arguments too like that all the time, but you're right, it did keep us communicating, it did keep us talking. And we all had homework to do every night, on top of our regular job. We were checking that stuff, like, dial it in, get everybody ready. Everybody's going to be accounted for, and all my points better match up with what I recorded at home. We do our lineups on paper and just give it to him at work. He'd do his thing, and away we went. So it's crazy.
Oh, that would have been easy if we all worked in the same place or lived on the same street. But so here's another thing. You mentioned, getting into little tiffs and arguments. We got into some ones. I mean, because like I said, until what we didn't know. So when a rule was kind of bent, like a written rule, we had to tweak it. But before we tweaked it, and it had ambiguous wording, guys would offer up their own interpretation, and I would say, no, this is how I'm interpreting the rules, and the guy would get back to me, and he'd argue with me, and friendships were lost to a certain extent because of this. Now, my advantage was I wasn't initially friends with everybody going in, but I ended up to be the arbiter. So by around 1994 or 5, I was like, enough is enough. These are the rules. This is what we're going to go by. If there's any discrepancy, I am going to be the arbiter. We could take league votes on certain things, but when it comes to rules interpretation, I'm going to have to be the arbiter. And if anybody has a problem with this, I don't have a problem with somebody else being the commissioner, you see.
Yeah.
So, that silenced a lot of it, and that was kind of cool. But see, because we were a rotisserie style, it wasn't that so, somebody would drop out and word of mouth, oh, I want to be in your league, and so on and so forth. Or one of us would make a new friend and say, oh, I always wanted to do fantasy football, but I never knew it. And so we'd add guys, and guys would leave, and this guy was, it's too much for me, or what, to keep the stats, and right. I'm not doing so well. I keep being in like 14th place every year. So, things would change. And I met through my ex-wife a very young Adam Kaplan back in around 1994. And he was NFL in our league for
Kaplan.
About that one.
Yes.
That one,
okay.
Yes. And he was local to us as well. And he was in my league for a few years. And then he was in a league with the dawning of industry experts, because basically what some of them were newspaper writers.
Right.
And he invited me into that league. And so I was competing in a head-to-head league with some guys that wrote for some of the little local newspapers in and around Pennsylvania, Delaware, and parts of the area. And that went on for about 3 years, and the commissioner kicked me out because I wasn't in the industry.
And at least you got to rub elbows for a little while, right? Hey, you got to rub elbows for a little while,
I'm kind of friendly with Adam Kaplan.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Exactly. So the league morphed into that, but through the 1990s, we lost guys, we gained guys, but we were still using that telephone recording device, and we were still using the USA Today. Everybody was still bringing their whatever magazine of choice to the live draft. By, I would say, 98 or 99, it became a draft at my house. And the prizes were pretty steep, and they went all the way. Let's see, $250. Even when we were down to even 12, never below 12 teams.
Yeah.
So trades. That's another. I had to arbitrate trades. See, think about this too. Here's an example of a loose end, Frank. Guys would make trades, and let's say I'm going to dump my dead wood on you, but you're going to dump your dead wood on me in an unbalanced trade. And because it was an unbalanced trade and you were over the roster limit, you had to cut somebody, and cutting a guy you just received in a trade, even if he was somebody else's dead wood. So that wasn't really fair. So I had to tighten up that rule. That was an example of a rule that had to be tightened up.
Now, do you have these all written
that
people could reference, or no? Or it was just kind of like you went over it, or anything they'd kind of look at on hard paper?
There was
or something.
No computers back then. Still no internet back then. I mean, I think by 1998, some people were on Prodigy.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's a lot of the
Not
things
everybody.
now.
So I was typing things up.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was typing things up on my word processor. Everybody would have. I would have an envelope for everybody every week with a label with their address, and as part of the league fee, I would get a roll of stamps. And every week I'd mail out anything that was pertinent, like roster changes, but I would send the rules out. And if the rules changed, the rules went into the envelope and out they went also. And this went on. If I didn't do it every week, I probably would at the very least do it every 3 weeks, because you also were responsible for keeping track of the roster changes, which for some guys, as they were dropping out of the running, so to speak, weren't that interested in doing it. But I had to do it every week on my word processor, and I would send it out to the guys in the envelopes with their labels on it. It was a very, when I say primitive, and you conjure up primitive in your mind and archaic, you folks out there listening to this have no idea.
Yeah, and the time that we put in is just insane too. I mean, we all put a lot of time in even now with research and stats and looking at players and stuff like that. But yeah, all the simple things, the basic things taken for granted now. I mean, yeah, for me with bylaws, going back to the bylaws and rules, I do that too. For my family league, I just put all the bylaws right on my website. So if anybody has an issue, we'll pull the website up and go, all right, well, what's it say for, trades this or roster setting that? And then other leagues I get in, if I'm running them as a commish, I do just a basic email that has, an overview, pretty much of the same. I'll tweak a few things, but just that everybody agrees to. And if it's a topic that you want to vote on, then we'll vote on it. But the rules, holy crap, yeah, they're absolutely crucial because the leagues go sideways or people drop out based on bad things like that alone sometimes, and like I said, the 25 or whatever to keep it interesting each week, that's a good idea to keep interest, to keep everybody active and involved. So even little prizes stuff too along the way, that always helps.
Exactly. And so, that kind of transitions into today's technology. Think about it now. I personally am in 6 leagues, 3 on Yahoo and 3 on ESPN. I can keep track of all 6 pretty easily. Mm-hmm. I have the apps on my phone, and the rules are there. If you want to click on the rules, they're there, and for our rotisserie league, which we have on Yahoo, the rules are there. And I would tweak a couple of them because we are IDP and we are rotisserie style, but they're right there on the site. This original rotisserie league, the one again that started in 1988, you couldn't do more than you couldn't keep track of more than that one league that you were in.
Yeah,
to think of even being in 2 leagues, oh man, to think of even being in 2 leagues, to do that and to sit with the USA Today on Monday, So that into the 21st century with technology. Well, the answer is literally in the 21st century. By 2004, we were playing on, I think it was the PFF site, the My Fantasy Football site. One of the other guys found out about it and said, Mitch, they charged $60 or $70, whatever it was. So we all kicked in. I paid for it. But some of the guys, because we're older guys, were having trouble with the technology. And then there were some guys that were dropping out. But what also was happening, some of our sons and son-in-laws started joining the league. Some of the guys that are left over. Mm-hmm. So we kind of morphed into that. And then finally, but we would still run it like the rotisserie league with the same stupid scoring and all that. But at least we were being able to kind of keep track of it on a site I was paying for. And it was like, no, this is no good. I can't do this. So by 2009, which is also the year I married my wife, Randy, I said, that's it, guys. We're done. I'm getting rid of this league. I'm starting a new rotisserie-style IDP league on Yahoo using their scoring, PPR scoring, their defensive scoring, their rules. Want to be in it? Fine. If you don't want to be in it, no hard feelings. But I am tired of all of the minutia, and with the technology that exists today, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing this. So most of the, I would say 8 of the guys we had left from the original league jumped on. and we got 4 other guys along the way, and we have a 12-team league. The other thing that the guys were asking me is, well, $250 is a little steep. So we brought it back to $100. We have a $1,200 prize pool, and we play 15 weeks, no playoffs, just 15 weeks, no 16 and no 17. And the way we have it broken down is we give $15 a week for a weekly winner, and the rest goes into first, second, third, and fourth place. Fourth place gets the $100 back. Third place gets $150, and first and second place get the bulk of the money. But, you can do the math, 15 times 15 weeks. Everybody has a chance to at least get a couple of shekels with a weekly win.
I like that. I like that setting.
So that's what we do now. What we do now. And it seems to work. No arguments. We got a good bunch of guys. Most of the players in the league, most of the owners are fellas that do other leagues as well. Maybe some don't do 6 leagues like I do. But my 5 kids, my oldest son Andrew is in our league, is in this league. And so he's been in it, and another guy, his son is in it, and another guy, his son-in-law is in it. So right there, that's 6 of us off the bat, and 6 other guys, including, in addition to myself, my lawyer friend, my optometrist friend, and one other fella who's retired, but he was a CPA, but not my CPA. Other than that, that's a league, and we still have a lot of fun. Up until 2 years ago, we were still getting together in my house, but that kind of fell by the wayside. I still make the offer. If you want to come here, I'll barbecue some burgers and dogs, and we'll sit with our laptops, we'll eat, and we'll draft. And usually 1 or 2 guys and my son Andrew are here, and we do that. And everybody else is connected to Yahoo, and that's how we draft.
Nice. Now, are you doing auctions, or are you just doing the snake draft through the teams?
Snake draft.
Okay.
Snake draft. And what I do is I socialize a lot with my friend Mark, who's the attorney, and his wife and my wife are fast friends for like 30 years. And we get together early in August. We let the wives pick the lots for the draft order. And it's very impartial. Everybody trusts him. Everybody trusts me. Then by that night, I just put it out there in an email to the guys and said, this is the draft order. Start your mocks or however you prepare. And so guys have 3-4 weeks to figure out their strategies. And that I've never had a peep out of anybody in terms of my wife and Mark's wife picking out the teams. This year, I actually am going to be drafting out of the 12-hole.
Okay.
So
that would be interesting. We do an auction draft right now for like my family league because everybody's in the same spot, and it's when I go visit my family out east in Maryland. So
yes,
we go out there. We got a big party. Everybody's together because I only get to see everybody once a year, twice a year at most, and we do an auction draft. But I mean, to have the wives pick the draft order, that would be absolute hilarity. If we did a snake draft, I can only imagine the way that would shake down. But no, we just do an auction, and we just go around the room and nominate, and we have a pretty good time with bidding. We got an auctioneer, and he runs everybody's bids and records everything. And then we're back and forth. We're talking trash on players. We're throwing guys up there. It's pretty fun, and drinks are flowing, good food. So any kind of live draft, that's always the best way to go, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't get
exactly. And the one auction league I'm in is a live draft. So that is a lot of fun.
I love it.
I couldn't see doing an auction draft online. I've been invited into them, and I'm like, nah, I like actually being there with the big board in front of us, and the auctioneer, and I just think that's so much fun, and so that one is going to be the first of the ones that I'm in. So I'm presently, in the league, in that league, in the league I'm the commissioner of. I'm in a quote unquote family league.
Okay.
Which is not really so much my family as much as the common denominator is my son-in-law. So we have him, some of his cousins. Now his brother-in-law is the commissioner, so the brother-in-law has a couple of cousins, and there's also my granddaughter's other grandfather, who is the father of my son-in-law, and it's a 10-teamer, and we also meet at my son-in-law, his house, or his brother-in-law's house, and we do the live draft there.
Nice.
So that's a family league I'm in, and 3 different neighborhood leagues, because you know what? I'm that guy, Frank. I'm that guy at the supermarket. Somebody will come up to me and say, Mitch, I know you're into fantasy football. One of our guys dropped out. Do you think you might be interested? And I'm that guy that can't say no. And that's how I got into 6 leagues.
Yeah, that's how I am too. I get into some good ones, and or you just get like I said, the fantasy community. You get some guys that are good to play with in a year, and then you're like, well, damn, I want to play. I got to get with that guy again in that league because we had a blast, And the different ones
Absolutely.
that I do, a lot of the different leagues, I do different strategies for each league, so I really never draft the same team. And a lot of people give me a hard time. They're like, "How the hell do you keep track of this stuff?" But I mean, I kind of go into it with, League A. My strategy is going to be, let's say, best player available. League B is going to be, let's try some 0 wide receiver. League C, let's try some 0 running, whatever, just kind of goofy stuff. And I just like to see, for my own amusement, what team I put together and which one I win with. And then at the end of the season, I just go back and kind of look at my little chicken scratch list and go, holy crap, I never thought I was going to win with this team. Or League D, what did I do in this one? I did best available. Holy crap, I looked at that opening draft and I shouldn't have went far at all, but here I sit in the playoffs or what have you. So I just like to look and laugh at, at the end of the season for me personally, but it's usually eight leagues. I think I do 10. Yeah, 10 max. And then I'm out, and then my wife gets upset.
well, here's the thing also, being in multiple leagues, sometimes you have player A going for you in a pivotal spot, and then in another league you're in, that same player is going against you that same week.
That's brutal.
And what really hurts, what's brutal sometimes is when that player is going against you, and that happens to be your highest stakes league. But yet the one where you have that player is the one where you're like sitting pretty as the number 1 seed, and you don't want to lose that, even though it might not be your high stakes league. And it's like, oh my goodness, what do I do? So what I generally try to do starting around week 6 is see where I'm at in various leagues. And then I might try to swing some trades so I'm loading up on the same player going down the stretch, so that I can be rooting for at least, some of the core of my teams that are still in the hunt with the same players. I could be rooting for the same players. Now, some years that works out really well. Going back to the heyday of Tom Brady and Damian Tomlinson, I made some really good money stacking those 2 guys up in multiple leagues when they were like really going back gangbusters.
Big time.
Last year it killed me because I started stacking Kareem Hunt with Todd Gurley.
Okay.
And that was fine for a while. And then Hunt gets suspended and Gurley all of a sudden disappears at the most pivotal time in fantasy during the postseason. So what happened to good old Mitch? Out. In every league I had those guys. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, last year, if you were in like a couple of leagues that had those two guys and it was week 8, and maybe you also had Kerryon Johnson, which I did in a couple of leagues, he got hurt later in the season. But if you would have those guys around week 8 and everybody's going, wow, you're stacked, you're loaded. And then to tell you, you're almost ashamed to tell your friends, I didn't win those leagues at all. I didn't do anything. I didn't cash.
Yeah, that's how last season was. God, it was awful.
Yeah, so I may be going back to a spreading it out strategy this year again and see how it goes. Every year's different. You know what? You look on paper, Frank. This year, wouldn't you say that this year no one's strategy to go into a draft is really a bad strategy, because the first 2 rounds especially, maybe even into the first 3 rounds this year, is pretty deep. You tier your players a certain way, and I like to do the same thing you do, which is to tier my positions. You can have a number of you can do a 0 RB strategy, a 0 WR strategy for the first 3 rounds, and you still could probably draft a pretty stout team.
Yeah, you're deep at least to stack 3 guys, I think, as mainstays on your roster. And then for me, I really want to hit that value mid and late rounds. And for me, like you said, with the tiers, I got my guys in my tiers when I rank them, and if I got them my value highlighted, I'll go after those a little more, even if someone else is available in that tier that I may like better, because I want to chase that ceiling a lot of times, and you got to take some chances. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you play it right, even mid, late round, you get some really good picks, and even the wide receivers are getting deeper and deeper, it seems like, with these slot guys and rookies that are playing right away. It's a lot more opportunity, I think, with the game being spread out as it is. Anybody can go off, whether it's a slot guy, 3rd wide receiver, even the 4th. And with best ball, taking kind of like that rotisserie league style highest scoring team, in essence, you could put those guys deep on your bench. And if they have a week where they absolutely go off, well, then you've got a nice week on your plate points wise.
Well, we can spend a whole nother episode going over my best ball strategy, which is totally different.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to
hit that
knocked
off air or something.
Yeah, another time.
Yes.
But if anybody's been listening to the Purple Rain podcasts, when you talked about your tiering for drafting strategy, I took away some nuggets from that myself. So anybody that has a chance to go back and listen to recent episode that Frank dropped on drafting strategy, to actually highlight in a different color your must-have player in that tier, that's a pretty good way of staying organized at your draft table, and that's a nugget I took away from that particular episode.
Yeah, thank you. I've been doing that a long time, and like I said in the thing, there's a lot of players that are in the forefront of your mind, but the guys that are in like the mid, those are the guys you forget about, and those are your 4th, 5th, 6th round tiers, and you're going, oh shit, who did I like in there again? If you got the guy highlighted and it's like, I'm taking him if he's there, it just makes it so much easier, to draft and keep you rolling, while the rest of your league is checking their own notes and sheets, and, they're not as focused as you are. And even if you're drinking a few and you're, a little loose, you can at least go, okay, all right, I'm right here. Yeah, I want him. It's less
exactly. And I know, and you know what? I know too many people that are just going off the rankings on the Yahoo board and on the ESPN board. They're not even doing any of that kind of research. And you can listen to a fantasy player can listen to podcasts and listen to the experts and read this guy's cheat sheet or that guy's cheat sheet. You just pick the 1 or 2 that you like. But, when you hit on a strategy that you hear about or read about and it works for you or it makes a lot of sense, don't drive yourself crazy, but come prepared. Don't just say, all right, well, I got my ESPN rankings in front of me right there on the computer as I'm drafting. You do that, you're going to find that you're not going to win more frequently than you are going to win. So that's why I kind of like the way you laid things out in that episode.
Nice. Well, now you said you were doing Yahoo. So is that your favorite
Right.
current platform, or what's your, are you kind of locked into that one?
I do like Yahoo. I find it easiest for me. ESPN's pretty easy too. I've worked on the CBS platform before. Just, I'm the type of guy, either in my regular work with technology or fantasy football or whatever I do, once I get a hold of it and I'm using it, you just use it or you lose it. And they're all pretty easy for me, but I like CBS, Yahoo, and ESPN the best. I'm not as big a fan of my FFL that much, and I think there's another one out there now that that's starting to gain popularity with some of the and I forget what it's called, but I just don't want to spread myself too thin.
Yeah.
But I'll keep this brief. Yeah, Yahoo's my favorite.
Yeah, I do most of the, if I'm joining leagues, they always seem to be a Yahoo league, and that's fine. I'll play on any of them. But like we were talking earlier at the top of this podcast was about with the scoring settings. Most of the guys running the leagues, I mean, we need custom settings because the settings landscape is changing, and the tweaks and the little things, I think we're at like the ground floor of how much these are changing. I did I'm in the Scott Fishbowl, and those are different kind of scoring stats and settings, and people are kind of working off of that, developing their own. And these are like a lot of trial NFL seasons to do these settings and see how you like them. So that sleeper is probably the best one as far as being customizable and doing what you want with your own league specifically. So getting into these different ones, there's all kinds of, it's like the possibilities are endless on this stuff.
Absolutely. Now, full disclosure, while I might be the godfather of original fantasy football, I have missed out on being on the Scott Fishbowl 2 years in a row already. So I'm not quite as familiar with their scoring other than talking to some of my friends that are in it. And you are absolutely 100% right. I'm already hearing of league commissioners that are tailoring their scoring system to the Scott Fishbowl scoring system also.
Yeah.
So I guess
I was in the same
I guess maybe.
Mm-hmm. I'm pulling it up here. Like I said, like you, 2 years. I was waiting 3. I got in, and the settings. I'm looking at what he's got. It's like half point, receptions. He's got first down. Trying to see, it was laid out. This is good radio when you're looking for stuff here.
Isn't this also the one where it's 1.5 for tight end reception, something like that?
It's a tight end premium, so you get some bonus there for sure. Yeah, they had a different one laid out, but I'll have to find it.
Yeah, no, like I say, I have a couple of friends that are in the Scott Fishbowl, and it's maybe that's the next generation of something I have to get into. But right now, I'm perfectly happy with my family and neighborhood leagues.
Oh yeah,
because these are friends of mine. This is the fantasy community. I'm also in 1 or 2 leagues with guys I met on Twitter. Same as I met you on Twitter. Yep. Guys I met on Twitter that heard of me, that seen my stuff being me talk about the old days and the way things were. And people are enamored with that. And I got to know a number of people and I'm pretty happy playing with them. I'll tell you this. I will not play fantasy football with people I don't know at all.
Yeah, it's hard.
I won't do it.
I totally agree. It's super hard to commit when you don't know somebody, and to get into a league that is a dud. I've done that, and it is awful. It sucks because I do put a lot into it, and
yep,
it's just the ultimate disappointment when you get in and you're halfway through, or even a couple weeks in, and you're like, this league's gonna bust. This sucks,
One year, 2000, I guess it was 2015. I got in the league with some guys that I don't remember how it happened, but I know you don't really like Facebook that much, but I do Facebook because my 5 kids are spread all over the universe, and I like to keep up with pictures of my grandkids and all that. Yeah, so somehow I got hooked up on a fantasy football group, and I got in with some guys, and that league imploded like by the 3rd week. It was just, I'll never do that again. Not with guys I don't know. Or women that I don't know. I just won't do it.
It's like an aspect of dating. Let me see your portfolio here. How far are we? How far can I go back and find out what you're all about before I commit to this league with you?
That's another episode, man. My dating stories when I was single 15 years ago. I mean, the women, they Google you. They Google you. They Google you to see if you. Oh yeah, now I'm digressing, but from 2004 to 2011, I was on my local school board. So when the women would Google me, that's what would come up. So my selling point was 10,000 voters can't be wrong.
That's right,
because I was reelected twice. So
that's great.
I mean, so technology even seeped its way into the dating game. But like I say, I've been happily married now 10 years and 2 weeks to my wife, and she's totally behind my whole fantasy football escapades.
That's great.
She knows that last week in August. She knows the last week in August every night. Look for me. I'll be doing a fantasy draft.
Yeah, I got my wife to jump in her work league. People were asking her at her work, and she was like, if I do this league, this is like 3 years ago, she's like, if I do this league, will you help me? And I'm like, I'll help you get your draft set, but I'm not going to, you're responsible for your own lineups and doing all that stuff. And she's a football nut, but not to the degree we are by any means. But I'll tell you what, I'll put her against anybody in some football trivia or knowledge. She is pretty damn good. But she did that league once. She won it at her work. She's like, I was like, what are you, a freaking ringer? You win the league at first in, so they didn't want her back in the work league. And then I got her to do one round in our family league. And then now she's like, I like it, but I'm not as into it as you are. But yeah, it's nice to have, a wife that supports you in this hobby, because, once in a while she'll say during the season, well, I'm not going to see you during the football season. You'll be on your computer all the time, or your phone with your scores in football leagues. I'm like, yeah, but after season we'll be all right.
Your squad's the Ravens. What's our squad?
Packers. I'm from Baltimore and I live in Wisconsin, so the Ravens are my home team. That's my city, my heart. And then the Packers is where I'm at, and I love them a lot. But she was born and raised in Wisconsin, so she is 100% Packers through and through. She likes the Ravens, opposite of me. She likes them. It's not her team, but she likes them, and she knows enough to be dangerous about them. But yeah, Packers are hers, heart and soul for sure. She's born and raised here.
So how do you, Frank, determine certain fantasy football drafting strategies and team construction strategies when it comes to a team like the Packers, for example, or the New York Jets, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or the Arizona Cardinals that have changed coaching staffs? You'd think that a player, well, he's a great fantasy player, but will he be a great fantasy player in this system? Or he sucked in this system, but maybe will he be better in this system? And I think about the Green Bay running backs, or I think about the Tampa Bay running backs that just were marred in the muck in the previous regimes. How will they do in these regimes? And will did I mention the New York Jets? Same there. I mean, we know that Le'Veon Bell, for example, is a fantasy stud. Maybe he could step in and do wonders anywhere he goes. But will he thrive in Adam Gase's system as much as he did in the Pittsburgh system, with those wide receivers and that offensive line and that second-year quarterback, his quarterback is not Ben Roethlisberger. He's not, working behind one of the most solid offensive lines. So where do you stand, knowing a little bit, more than a little bit about the Green Bay Packers with their new coaching? Where do you stand on constructing fantasy strategy with players that are in new regimes and new systems?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I love that question. For me, the way I look at it is I try to keep it somewhat simple, but I look at it as in three parts. Prior to the first, you got to look at top-notch players are going to make plays wherever they go, and they're going to be playmakers. But the first thing I want to look at is who's the coach? Okay, who's our new coach? It's Matt LaFleur. We really don't know anything about him, but I want to get as much information on that coach's body of work as I can. And the NFL turns retread coaches year in and year out. So if you look at like the Bucks with Bruce Arians going the Buck, we know what Bruce Arians likes to do, right? We kind of know his body of work, how he runs an offense. So now does he have better players that fit his system? Yes or no? The second part would be, of those players, who hasn't he had in the past? So in Arizona, he had Rosen. Rosen's now with the Dolphins, but he's jumping into Jameis Winston. So does he have more opportunity at quarterback than he did prior? Hell yes. Different things like that. I like to look at that kind of first and second. And then lastly is like the offensive line. There's so much information now for fantasy football, for NFL, for everything, stats, you name it. If you want to know about it, you can learn it, love it, live it, right? In like 15-minute crash course if you want. But I like to go look up these offensive line grades and reviews and kind of, is the offensive line consistent? Are they good? Are they bad? Is he going into a better situation? If they want to run the ball, are they good? Like the Jets, if they want to run the ball more with Le'Veon Bell, are they going to be able to in New York? That line is kind of, like you said, he was running behind a pretty solid line in Pittsburgh. So if that fails, would I knock Bell back a few spots in my rankings? Probably, because he's not going to an upgraded line, no matter how bad Gase wants to run that ball and make him a centerpiece of the offense. So, there's a lot of things in play, and I think that's why coaching changes, to me, I view, they're the most frustrating to figure out. But you got to kind of jump in and assume, like I said, the players are going to make play. If these guys are playmakers, they're going to stand out and get it done. Even David Johnson on some of those bad teams, he was still making plays. Larry Fitzgerald on bad Cardinal teams. Coaching tendencies is kind of how I'll see, what they'll do. I think with the Packers and Matt LaFleur, he doesn't really have a body of work. He came from these coaching trees with McVay and Shanahan. But I think for me, I've been to some practices and camps, and I'm local, so I listen to it on radio all day. It seems like the Packers, to me, and just from what I've seen up at camp, seem like they're going to be more balanced. It's not going to be, there was such turmoil here last year with Rodgers winging the ball, calling his own plays up in the dirt. You didn't really get a feel of what was going on last year because it was in such disarray. So this year, I think it's going to be more balanced. So, does Matt LaFleur, what does he inherit? He inherits a top-notch quarterback playmaker. Aaron Jones is a playmaker. He just really wasn't used to his extent and potential under McCarthy because McCarthy viewed him as, liable in pass coverage. So if LaFleur goes, hey, you got a fresh start, let's see what you can do. He's been getting all the reps at practice. He's been hurt. I think he's doing like a hamstring or something, so he hasn't been getting everything, so to speak, become preseason. He's going to be involved if he's healthy, and when the season kicks, it's going to be balanced. It's going to be keep Rodgers healthy. Obviously, they can't afford to have him hurt again. So it's all these little kind of what ifs, in your mind. So if you take all those what ifs and I'll try to align them into what makes the most sense based on what I know and what I've seen, you kind of got to rank them how you see, not what the media is saying. What was the media saying 2 weeks ago? Aaron Rodgers won't be able to call his own plays at the line. This will cause friction. There could be a schism in Green Bay, right? That's all I heard a couple weeks ago. Guess what I saw on today on Twitter? What was the breaking news from Pete Prisco? Aaron Rodgers will be able to call his own plays. The national people don't know these things, right? You got to pay attention to your local beat writer guys, the guys that are in the locker rooms and local to the community and the state. Those are the ones that I take the most from. I'm not listening to FS1 or NFL Network's guy that's in Cali talking about the Jets. He's not even in New York. He's in getting stuff from third-hand guys or whatnot. I'm looking what the accounts that I follow on Twitter are more local beat writers for the teams, and then that's kind of where I'll draw some of my own opinions from. What does this guy say? He's in the team meeting rooms every day with coaches and doing interviews and players. He's around the players. He's at every camp and practice and all the private ones. What does he say? That's what I want. That's who I'm looking at getting information from. And
I do like the info from the beat writers and the broadcast journalists that are working the beat as well, and even the internet beat writers. A lot of the guys that used to write for the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News are now either on TV, on sports talk radio, or working for The Athletic, which is a website that I subscribe to. Yep. So you filter down you filter down to the local component of the Philadelphia portion of The Athletic, and you'll see some pretty familiar names from the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Philadelphia Daily News. So I agree with you there. And we're also blessed to have Ray Didinger here covering the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's already been placed in the Pro Football Hall of Fame writers wing from his days with the Philadelphia Daily News and the NFL Films. His NFL Films days. And NFL Films is located right here in the suburb of Philadelphia, too. So,
nice.
In Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Okay. So, which is literally right across the bridge from the sports complex where our teams play here. So Ray Didinger is a legend, and when he says something, if I hear him on our local talk radio station or on the local sports report, I'll sit up and take notice.
Yeah, that's how I am too. Like the Packers, they've got Rob Demoski. He's been doing a lot with ESPN, but he's been a local guy forever. Like I remember when he was a new guy. Mm-hmm. Jason Wilde's another really good one. He's got me blocked. I don't know why. I asked him at the last training camp, and he kept walking from me. So I screamed. I'm like, Wilde, unblock me. And he laughed and kept walking. But I follow him when I can. He's always on the radio. He's got a good show in the morning. And, yeah, those are the guys. And with Twitter and, current state of fantasy football, there's so many outlets to get information from, and everybody likes their own outlet for whatever their own reasons are, right? So, you get people with these hot takes or just an opinion based off of one thing, or maybe it's a new thing of numerous. So I'm just more patient now, I guess, because I'm older. Maybe, I don't know, but I just look at things for what they are and try to go to the most authentic, original source I can go to for football stuff regarding things like this, players, changes, new things, old things, and that's kind of where I'll draw my own opinion from. And plus, I mean, our eyes have seen a ton of football games in our lifetime. So what do my eyes tell me? What does my gut tell me? There's a lot of football that's been played, so kind of draw off of that and use that to be successful. But yeah, we're never 100%. I mean, we all get players wrong and we miss on guys and somebody that's supposed to be the second coming, and then we get burned, but that's the fun of it.
Oh yeah. I've whiffed on more than my share over the last 30 something years.
Yeah. Jimmy Graham was my big whiff last year. That was a good one for me. I swore he was going to just
Well, are you looking at that through your Green Bay, your green and gold eyeglasses there? I mean, is that where that was coming from? Yeah. But I don't know. I would have thought that he would have done better playing in the Packers offense. But then you have some people saying, well, Mike McCarthy never really did much with tight ends. And that's kind of true, too. I mean, the last one he had was several years ago already. Jermichael Finley. Yeah. So, and a lot of what we're talking about at this stage of our conversation really kind of transitions into almost where fantasy football is going from here to the future, because with all the electronic media, with websites, with with all these sites that started fantasy football and then daily fantasy football and daily fantasy sports and then transitioning into sports book gambling. You can go to FanDuel and DraftKings in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and do sportsbook gambling now on those sites. Now, not every state, and I think Wisconsin is a state you can't, if I'm not mistaken. But here in Pennsylvania you can, and I think that's going to take a lot of the dollars and focus away from your casual fantasy football player who may be having his or her roots in gambling from back in the day, and now it might be easier for them to do that, and so they're not playing as much fantasy football anymore. So I see that possibly hurting the industry a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to say for me where it would go. I don't know, past like 2020 and way down the road, because I feel like we've already got so much. How much more can we add to these platforms and things? And as far as information or player updates, I think we're closer than ever as we can get to players from a fan standpoint. How close can you get to a player without leaving your house? Oh my God. I mean, you got their personal Twitter or Instagram feeds. You've got live videos on the internet you can dial up that get you on the sidelines with this guy. You can see what he did in camp, a play, or what have you. I mean, we know so much. I just can't see anything past that other than, like I said, tweaking of these settings, new kind of formats, new kind of leagues, new styles and setups. Maybe it's that. I couldn't tell you. We're just going to keep rolling with it, and wherever it takes us is where we're going to get to. But man, it seems like you can only cut the pie so many ways. How many, you know what I mean? How many more slices are we getting out of this fantasy football pie? I don't know.
And information is instantaneous.
Right.
I remember some of our early drafts in the rotisserie league where we'd show up and a guy would draft and an owner would draft a certain player, and 3/4 of the room would start laughing at him, and he's like, "Well, what are you laughing at?" "Well, didn't you hear on the radio today or yesterday that this guy's out for the season?" Now, if you didn't listen to, if you had the type of job where you weren't in the car and you couldn't listen to sports radio, or you commuted on the train, so you didn't even listen in your car, and you got home and there wasn't the 24-hour local news like there is now, or you just missed out on that and you didn't know, and you might draft. I mean, we were drafting guys that retired. Now, when I became the commissioner, I would, if somebody did that, I'd say, you don't really want to draft him. He retired, and I'd let him make another pick. But that's the kind of thing that was going on. But now, information's instantaneous.
Yeah,
and right up in front of us. I mean, we could literally watch a guy get injured in practice on our computer screen minutes before we're drafting, if that's the case.
Yep.
It's remarkable how much meat is on the bone for fantasy owners. And I'm in a league. We have some of our sons and son-in-laws in the league, so younger guys. But we have a couple of guys that are older than me, and they just, information overload. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to do their research before the draft and hope that they hit it right.
Yeah. Yep. We talked about some of our favorite aspects. What do you think? What's your least favorite aspect of fantasy football right now? Anything?
It's when it has to do with trading. When you make a trade offer and somebody doesn't even bother rejecting it, they just let it go. If it's a 1-day or 2-day deadline on the trade offer, that you can't even get a response, that burns me to no end. And then sometimes somebody will make me a trade offer, and I'll make a counter offer. But if I make a trade offer, somebody's not countering me. I'm not going. Sometimes I'm going to make you a very fair trade offer right off the jump. And if I make you a trade offer right off the jump, that's a fair trade offer, you really should consider why that trade offer was made. But sometimes I'll make one that's a little bit more slanted in my favor because it might not be my final offer. So come back with a counter. That's why they got that little function there, that functionality on the trade piece.
Yeah,
you can make a counter offer, and some of the leagues I'm in, the owners don't do it, and so probably that's my least favorite because I love to trade. I was in 3 leagues last year. I counted them. 3 leagues where 0 trades were made.
Wow.
0 trades.
Jeez.
And in one other league that I was in, home league, 2 trades were made, and I was involved in both of them. So I just that's probably my favorite part of participating in fantasy football is the in-season trading, and my least favorite is the lack of participation in-season trading by some of my counterparts.
Yeah, I definitely see that. That's always the most frustrating thing for me too, is at least acknowledge it, reject it, decline it, do something. Or when you do a trade and then you get this like dissertation back of, I can't believe you'd offer me that. How dare you? And they, you've got like 2 paragraphs worth of stuff because the other person is so pissed. I had that a couple years ago, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Just hit yes or no. I don't need to hear why this is unfair in your opinion. Just hit yes or no and give me a counter offer or something. Come on, man. Like it's hit yes or no. Yeah.
Don't let it drop. It's just, don't make excuses that you don't know the technology. We've been using the same platform for 4, 5, 6 years. And I'm not only talking about the league that I'm the commissioner of. I'm talking about any of those leagues. But in the league I'm the commissioner of, with some of the guys that have been around for 30 plus years, there's a couple of guys that absolutely positively will not trade because every time you offer them a player, it's like, why is he offering me that player? Is there something wrong with him?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with play? Why is he offering me, Le'Veon Bell or this one or that one? Is there something wrong? No, you have. I'm loaded with running backs. I just had an injury in wide receiver. I'm looking for a wide receiver. I'm offering you a good player here. I'm offering you Nick Chubb. Like last year, I offered around Nick Chubb so I can get myself a decent wide receiver in my one particular family league. I had too many. I didn't need all running backs I had, and my wide receivers were, I either whiffed on them or they were dropping like flies because of injury. I was trying to get myself a decent wide receiver, so I was offering decent running backs, and I couldn't get an answer. What's wrong with this guy? So that's another problem.
Yeah, the ultimate defense. They're just too defensive because I've had a few of them in some other leagues too, and they're like, well, they'll answer me back and say, well, what's wrong? Why don't you want them? And it's like, listen, we're all playing the game. I'm trying to like look ahead to what's best for my roster and the guys I got. So I'm not going to throw bad apples at you. I'm going to give you somebody decent. I need this. And a lot of times I'll do a 2-for-1, just so the other person can say, all right, well, he's giving me 2 players to 1. If it's a guy I want, I don't care. I'll do it. At least something to spark the guy to trade. But geez, yeah, don't make it harder than it has to be. I think for me, I guess the other least favorite aspect right now for me of fantasy football that's just annoying is I think it's just like hot takes and just garbage and some of this. I mean, we got to be smarter than the baseline, I guess. For there's one highlight catch of somebody in a training camp, and oh my God. You can watch his ADP go from, 20 spots in a week. And it's like this guy had one camp highlight, and now he's going to be your, top 10 pick. in fantasy? Come on, guys. And then you'll just have all these hot takes about he's going to be the player of the year, this and that. And it's like, just calm down. Like, everything is so extreme with this stuff. It's like it's a training camp catch against a guy that was barely covering him because he probably doesn't want to get hurt in August, right? Or I think there was
exactly.
one. I seen one with like some tackling drills on. I think it was David Montgomery. And it's like, boom, here's your stud. This is why they drafted him. Listen, it's barely contact. The drill, what you're seeing as a drill, you're not understanding, because the drill is not to tackle the guy for the defensive back or linebacker. They just need to make contact to show the coach, and all 22 is that he's in the right place at the right time in that gap. That's it. But when he sees him get a stiff shoulder from Montgomery, and it's like, oh yeah, he's untackled. You can't tackle this guy. Look at him. He's rolling. It's like, calm down, man. This is just, it's only training camp. Like, think in the mindset of a player. It's hot as hell out there. You've trained all year long. You don't want to get hurt. You got to practice, but you don't want to get hurt. It's such a fine line to walk for a player. I can only imagine the internal battle that you want to give 100% in practice, and you want to show the coaches, and you're going to do your thing, especially if you're a young guy coming up. You want to make, some good tape. But man, I mean, just kind of understand. I think people just don't understand that these are players just like me and you with their own little battles. I don't want to get hurt. I'm not going to take a playoff, so to speak, but I'm not going to, why do I have to go all out sprinting after this guy if he just beat me off the line, kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like, come on, get a little reality grip here. But man, these videos are just nonstop. You see somebody throw run cones in the off season. It's like, he's coming back. He's going to be fully 100%. And it's on once the season starts. Like, I don't buy into a lot of that stuff. And it's just crazy to see how many people jump on a bandwagon or a training camp vid. I think I've been hashtagging like off season hype video a lot, or off season hype season something, just to make fun of this stuff because it's comical to me. But I don't know. That stuff it's probably my least favorite right now.
Well, wait until the preseason too. You'll get a third string wide receiver that's going to make 7 catches for 120 yards, and his ADP starts breaking into something, and I'm like, oh, and I say to myself, pump the brakes on this guy. I mean, he's probably not even going to make the team. And I mean, there have been so many guys on the Philadelphia Eagles that have had remarkable training camp stats in preseason games, and they end up getting cut, or they never see the light of day in a real game. So people's got to pump the brakes on hot takes and what they see in the highlight reels and what they see especially in quarters 2, 3, and 4 of a preseason game. Absolutely. Just, pump the brakes. So, yeah, I agree with you 2,000% on that.
Excellent. Well, hey, let's end it on one final deal here. Let's go with let's end it on best advice for starting your own league. Because, man, being in a league is fun when you're invited and doing one, but then to break off and commish your own and do your own league, what's some good advice for starting your very own league? Maybe it's your first league. Like I said at the top of the show, there's a lot of people that are brand new and getting into fantasy for the first time. Maybe you've been like I was back then. I was in it for work. I never had to lift a finger. And then maybe, I think like 4 or 5, I was in like 4 or 5 seasons before I went off and said, you know what, I'm going to do my own and put something together, and I'm the commish and I'm going to run this thing. What's some good advice that you could recommend for starting your own league?
Just as I said earlier about not wanting to play in leagues with people I don't know, my advice, if you're starting a league, start with people you know. Or if you're inviting a relative or a close friend and he has a close friend, that's okay. But total strangers, I would stay away from when you're starting a new league. So that's number 1. Number 2, keep it simple. Keep the rules and scoring simple to industry standard so that the people that are joining your league, your friends, your relatives, your wife, her girlfriends, anything in between, so that everybody can be on the same page and understand what they have to do. Then you can start branching off into some of the nuances and tweaks and new things that come about in subsequent seasons. But at least for that first season, keep it simple so that everybody, can be on the same page and everybody can understand what it is that they probably already know about fantasy football playing.
Nice. Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Keep it simple for people. They'll have a lot more fun when it's less to think about too.
Exactly. And fun. I've had fun chatting with you. I mean, this time went very, very quickly. I mean, we could probably come up with other topics to talk about down the road as an offshoot of what we've been discussing here today. This has been a lot of fun for me, Frank.
Definitely. Yeah, I've enjoyed having you on. It's been about an hour, so we can wrap it up, but let's get together at some point here during the season or before, whatever we've got time outside of our full-time lives, and either do a little kind of football forecasting maybe on what we think the real season will play out like, or let's pick something and get together and talk again. It's definitely a good conversation.
Well, thanks again, Frank, and good luck to you during the preseason and into the season.
Absolutely. You too. Let me know how your leagues go. Tag me in some stuff, and we'll compare notes here.
You got it. You got it, my friend. Take care now.
Yep.
Yeah, all right. This press conference is over.
Go away.
No, it's over, Phil.
Well, please,
It's over.